Ludlow Castle sits in the town of Ludlow, in which was once a Welsh border stronghold. The town of Ludlow, where the castle sits at one point, could be interpreted as the capital city of Wales. Throughout history, it is featured as an extremely important structure and fortification defending England against the Welsh. It has had a turbulent and interesting history, featuring sieges, battles and power struggles. Today, it features a remarkable ruin and acts as a remarkable reminder of the volatile relationship that existed in history between the Welsh and the English. Join us today as we tell you the history behind and show you around the fantastic Ludlow Castle. Remember, if you do enjoy these videos, please support the channel by subscribing and also checking out the other videos on our channel. Ludlow Castle was most probably founded by Walter de Lacy, a powerful Norman nobleman, around the year 1075. Walter had arrived in England following the Norman Conquest and had been part of William Fitzosborne's household. Fitzosborne would then become the Earl of Hereford and was tasked with settling the area. During this time, several castles were founded around the west of Herefordshire, securing the border against the Welsh. The Welsh were unconquered and acted as a severe threat to England following William the Conqueror's invasion and ascension to the throne. Walter de Lacy was the Earl's second in command and was rewarded with 163 manors across 7 counties, making him hugely rich, and many of these 90 manors were in Herefordshire. When de Lacy began building Ludlow Castle, it was originally called Dinham Castle. Ludlow would become the most important of his castles, being at the heart of his new estates and also being at the strategic crossroads over the River Teme. Walter would be killed in 1085, but his son would continue the building work. The castle's stone fortifications were added possibly as early as 1080 and were finished before 1115. The de Lacys would spend much of their time in Ireland. However, in 1224, Henry III would visit Ludlow to sign a treaty with a rebel Welsh prince, Llewellyn. Henry would lose control in the 1260s, leading to the Second Barons' War. During this time, the rebel leader, Simon de Montfort, seized Ludlow Castle, but was shortly recaptured. Prince Edward escaped captivity in 1265 and met his supporters at Ludlow before beginning his campaign to retake the throne. During this time, the Great Hall and the Solar Block were constructed inside the castle. In 1301, Roger Mortimer would marry Joan, the granddaughter of the castle's owner, and would take control of Ludlow Castle. Around 1320, he built the Great Chamber Block, adding to the ornate complex. When finding himself on the losing side of the Despencer War, Mortimer would find himself in exile following an escape from the Tower of London. Here he formed an alliance with Edward II's estranged wife, Isabella. Mortimer would become the Earl of March and became extremely wealthy, entertaining Edward III at Ludlow Castle in 1329. Ludlow Castle would become Mortimer's show castle and a tool for him to show off or boast about his remarkable wealth. Ludlow Castle would be under the control of Henry IV when Owen Glendower's revolt broke out in Wales. Military captains were appointed to the castle in order to protect it. During this time, Henry would see the importance that Ludlow would have. When the Wars of the Roses broke out in 1450, Ludlow did not find itself on the front line of the conflict, but acted as a safe retreat from the main fighting. However, the Battle of Ludford Bridge did take place just outside of Ludlow in 1459, which resulted in a huge victory for the Lancastrian Henry VI. When Edward IV would defeat Henry, he would visit the castle regularly. He established a council there to govern his estates in Wales. In 1473, he sent his eldest son Edward V and his brother Prince Richard to live in the castle, which was also made the seat of the newly created council in the Marches of Wales. This effectively made Ludlow the capital city of Wales, even though today it remains in England. Following the end of the Wars of the Roses, Henry Tudor, or Henry VII, would use the castle as a regional base, granting it to his son, Prince Arthur. Interestingly, Arthur would use it for his honeymoon with his bride Catherine of Aragon in 1501. The council would still operate at this time, dealing with many major issues in Wales, and would be in charge of maintaining order. Mary I even spent 19 months in Ludlow, overseeing the Council of the Marches. During the reign of Elizabeth I, She appointed Sir Henry VIII as the president of this council in 1560. Here, he would extend the castle by building family apartments and many other buildings, including a courthouse. By the 17th century, Ludlow was luxurious and featured a grand household. In the castle, the future Charles I was declared the Prince of Wales by James I in 1616. The Council of the Marches during 1641 would be dramatically stripped of its powers following criticism. When a civil war broke out in England, Ludlow supported the Royalists. A Royalist army would be placed in the town. In April 1646, a parliamentary army stormed Ludlow with the intent of taking the castle. Following a short siege, the castle was surrendered on good terms. Charles II returned to the throne in 1660 and reinstated the Council of the Marches, but the castle never recovered from the war. The Council of the Marches too would fail to re-establish its control over Wales and disbanded in 1689, bringing an end to Ludlow Castle's role in government. Following this, the castle would deteriorate rapidly. In 1722, the writer Daniel Defoe visited and noted that the castle is in the very perfection of decay. The stonework became overgrown with ivy. In the 19th century, the government's barrack office were considering using the castle as a French prisoner of war camp for up to 4,000 prisoners during the Napoleonic Wars. This proposal was dropped, and the Earl of Powys was offered the chance to buy Ludlow Castle. During the Victorian times, the fortification was held in high esteem, and the number of tourists to the castle greatly increased. During the Second World War, the castle was used by the Allied military. The Great Tower was used as a lookout post, and the United States forces used the castle's gardens for baseball games. Following this, the castle would then see major redevelopment work, with repairs being carried out. This is where we begin our tour of the remarkable Ludlow Castle. Upon entering Ludlow Castle, you are taken into the castle's outer bailey. It is absolutely huge and measures 500 feet from north to south. Within the bailey, there would have been stables, storehouses and workshops to resupply the needs of the garrison. The large size of the bailey also suggests that this was a meeting place for soldiers during the invasions of Ireland in 1171, in which Hugh de Lacy, the castle's owner, was heavily involved in. Also, the outer bailey would have served as an exercise yard and could have seen jousting take place here. Most of the earlier structures that were present have been demolished, but a number of interesting stone buildings are still present. These Tudor buildings, known as the Porter's Lodge and the prison, were built in 1552. They were also known later as the Pembroke Buildings after the Earl of Pembroke, William Herbert. On the right there is also a stable block that was added in 1597. Today the Porter's Lodge acts as a gift shop, and the prison building is rather ruinous. However, it would be interesting to investigate if or who was held captive here, inside these small rooms or cells. The Chapel of St Peter was built by Roger Mortimer in around the late 13th or early 14th century to celebrate his escape from the Tower of London on St Peter's Day, the 29th of June, 1324. In 1328, he assigned a rent of £6, 13 shillings and 4 pence to 2 chaplains to celebrate daily services for the souls of the King and Queen. Unfortunately, during our visit to Ludlow, we were unable to visit the chapel. However, it is an extremely important building. In 1570, it was renovated, with an upper floor being used as a courthouse and also a records office. Mortimer's Tower was built in the 13th century, taking its name from Mortimer, who acquired the castle in 1308. The tower is semicircular, which is different to most of the towers found at Ludlow, which are all rectangular. The tower has been much changed, and the ground floor is rather eerie when you walk in. The tower was possibly built as a gatehouse that would control the rear exit of the castle. The river nearby could be followed for a direct route to the nearby Wigmore Castle and even Wales, so it was important to have guards watching this route regularly. It is likely that Richard the Duke of York and his son Edward, who would later become Edward IV, escaped through here on the 12th of October 1456, following the rout of their forces by the Lancastrians at the Battle of Ludford. When entering the inner bailey, by crossing the bridge under the coat of arms, One of the first rooms you encounter is the judges' lodgings. These consist of a 3-storey block built up against the Norman curtain wall. These lodgings were probably built by Sir Henry VIII before 1581. These rooms helped to accommodate nearby judges and attorneys who needed to stay at the castle when the courts of the Council of the Marches were in session. The Great Tower, or Keep, has been described as one of the most curious Norman keeps still standing. The combination of a gatehouse and keep in one isn't entirely unique to Ludlow. However, the development of the Great Tower was extremely complex. There are 4 stages of development within the keep. The first is the 11th century gatehouse, which acts as the main entrance to the castle. The second is that the gatehouse was raised to a 4-storey tower in the early 12th century. There was a 2-storey living hall on the first floor and an adjoining solar or bedroom. At the top of the original interior stairs, Norman windows still survive. The third stage is in the late 12th century. The original entrance was blocked to give the keep greater security. The final stage of construction was in the second half of the 15th century, when the Great Tower was reduced in size and also floors were inserted in the hall, creating new rooms. The Round Chapel, or Chapel of St Mary Magdalene, was the most important chapel in the castle. It features a circular nave, which is still standing. It would also have featured a rectangular chancel, which today is ruined. Round naves were built in the same style as the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, which was supposedly erected on the site of Christ's tomb. This was seen by knights on crusade, and then copied back in England by crusaders. The date of this chapel is unknown, however this chapel is hugely impressive. If you look closely, you can see gargoyle heads. Interestingly, it seems that there's a grave marker within the round chapel, or a marker that marks something significant. The North Range is a fine set of buildings that started to be built in the late 13th century. It is regarded as one of the best set of examples of architecture from this period. When looking at the range, you can really see how huge this complex is. The solar block was the first building built in this range, with the latest being the Tudor lodgings, which were added in the 16th century. The Great Hall was the most important room in the castle. It was used for ceremonial and public occasions. It was said that a great feast was provided here, with excellent music to celebrate the investiture in London of the Prince of Wales. The hall is 60 feet long and 30 feet wide, with an undercroft below. Where we are standing would have been the original floor level of the hall. The hall was lit by the tall windows that contained seats. Guests could enjoy their banquet, then listen to some music while sitting by the windows. This room would have been decorated richly, with immense decorations such as rich tapestries and paintings, aimed to impress the guests. The Great Chamber Block contained the private apartments of the Lord and the Lady of the castle, though during the 16th and 17th centuries, these rooms were taken over by the Council of the Marches. The first floor had one room, which was the original Great Chamber. On the east wall, you can still see a fireplace with carvings around it. The council chamber would have been decorated with shields and inscriptions from the former Lord Presidents of the council. The second floor of this room could have had a balcony in which guests could view the proceedings going on in the Great Hall. One of these rooms could have also been a ladies' withdrawing chamber or a solar. It was noted that this room needed to be furnished with hangings that were 12 feet high and 60 yards long. The Tudor lodgings, which were once called the Pendover Tower, were built in the 16th century and replaced older buildings. They were used to accommodate attorneys, clerks and Queen's messengers that were present in the castle. There is a tradition that the 2 princes in the tower, which were murdered in the Tower of London before the accession of Richard III, once lived in these rooms, which were on this site. Also, it is believed that these rooms were once also an armoury. Prince Arthur's apartments, or the solar block, is a wing that was built in 2 stages. In the late 13th century, a number of impressive fireplaces were added. In the winter of 1501, Prince Arthur and Catherine of Aragon, who would later become married to her brother-in-law, Henry VIII, lived on the top floor. In this area you can ascend a staircase in which takes you into a flanking tower which features a private bed chamber. The Great Kitchen was built around the same time as the Great Hall. It was probably linked to the North Range by a gallery. In this area you can see the remains of a great fireplace and also a number of ovens that would have been used to create pastries and bread. The Great Tower's court was a service area that was enclosed by the Great Tower and the 11th century curtain walls. For much of the castle's history, it served as a high security area. Inside this area are two towers. The southwest flanking tower is sometimes known as the Oven Tower, as it was used for baking in the 16th and 17th centuries. The Postern Tower features a tradition that the doorway to this lower tower was used by Princess Mary Tudor or Mary I for access to a walk made for her outside the curtain wall. Today, this is still known locally as Queen's Walk. There is also a well in this area that supplied the castle with regular water. This was a hugely important part of the castle during a siege. The blocked gatehouse passage was once too the grand entrance into the castle. In the late 12th century, the outer archway was blocked and the passageway became a storeroom or even a dungeon. At one stage this space would have only been 5 feet tall, which would have been brutal to be imprisoned within. Overall, Ludlow Castle is a castle with a rather rich history. Originally intended as a castle to strike fear into the hearts of the unconquered Welsh, or as a fortification intended to keep invaders out of England, today it sits as a reminder of the times where a union didn't exist between the two countries. It is extremely grand, having hosted many kings and queens, some who live in the canon of English history and infamy. What can't be disputed though is the sheer size of Ludlow Castle and how it's transitioned throughout history with the addition of many different incredible rooms and buildings. This was a castle with two incredibly important principles in mind: defence and control. The defence of William the Conqueror's newly acquired realm and exerting the might and control of the English monarchy onto the nearby and hostile Welsh, and also those rebels who wouldn't support him. Once again, thank you for watching. To support the channel, please subscribe. Once again, thanks for watching.